Right. So, as far as work breakdown structure is concerned, you do understand that it is the breakdown of the whole project down to the level of work packages. What are the major things which come in between? A project could be broken down into major sections, which could be called as control accounts. Control accounts can further be broken down directly into work packages or planning packages. Or if at all you feel like that the work packages are not small enough, then you may have further breakdown, and the lowest level of detail would be considered as a work package. Work package should be something in which a couple of activities could be done and that package can be completed, right? Therefore, I am not considering activity to be part of our work breakdown structure. Activity is a more detailed thing which is needed for the purposes of estimation of time, estimation of resources, and cost, right? So basically, we would rather be restricting ourselves to the work package because a project manager is usually interested until the level of work package because it is the level at which the progress of the project can be measured comfortably. If work packages has got a number of activities, naturally the project manager would be considering that all those activities must have been completed as if the objectives of the work package are achieved, and therefore the work package is considered complete. So that is exactly the level of the work of the project manager. The interest of project manager is down to the level of work package and not really the further breakdown, which is the activities. I do not mean to say that these activities are not important, but they are important from the team members' point of view. When the team actually, which is working on the project, they have to do that work, they have to identify those activities, they have to estimate them in various ways. Actually, so at the team level, of course, activities do matter a lot. But at the project manager's level, uh, work package is considered to be the smallest unit of work breakdown structure. I hope you get that point.
Yes.
Okay, are you aware about the 100% rule? Heard about it?
It is, uh, yes, I have heard of it. Yeah.
Okay. So, generally speaking, by default, if something we are doing, we planned it for say 10 days, and until that activity is completed, that activity or that work package is accomplished, we would not consider it complete at all. If somebody asks you what is the progress on that activity or that work package, you would say zero until it is complete. That is called the 100% rule, which means that the progress until the completion would not be considered at all. But as soon as that thing is complete, then we could say that this is 100% complete. Well, when I say 100% rule, I am not saying that this is the only way of assessing the progress of anything happening in your project. There are other ways also, but this is the default version, right? So this is quite solid because until and unless there is something which is which is which can be delivered, we are not considering it to be complete. I hope you understand my point.
But what it says there in the left-hand side is something different. It said 100% rule means include every aspect, nothing extra, nothing missing. So when
Yeah,
we're building the
yeah,
WBS, we put in 100%, not 99 or 101.
yeah. First of all, whatever the scope has been determined for that activity or that work package, that all aspects must be completed 100% with no additions. And if say it is 97% complete, you won't say it is 97% complete. You would say it is 0% complete until it is really complete. That means 100%. Moreover, you cannot add anything to it. You can't say that I had to do 100% and I have done 101%. 101% is not acceptable until unless it comes through a change request and that requirement is revised, that work package acceptance criteria is revised. That means the 100% definition of 100% would change. But for the
Yep.
time being, we will not consider anything complete until it is 100% complete, right?
Yep.
There are other ways of assessing the progress, and in various projects, you might have to deal with certain circumstances. Although this is very precise rule, this is also called 0-100 rule. It is progress will be 0% until completion, and after completion, it will be considered 100%. But there are other rules, like, you could have our 50-50 rule. And 50-50 rule would be normally when you are dealing with contractors or vendors, you have to make certain payments to them when you book your order, and the remaining payment is usually to be paid when the work is completed. So, in those kind of circumstances, you may apply a 50-50 rule, because you see, you can't release money to anyone until it is fully complete. As per the 100% rule, the payment cannot be released until the job has been completed. But if in case of a contractor, you may have to pay some kind of an advance or mobilization to that contractor. And for that, you may set up a rule which is 50-50. That means 50% payment would be done to the contractor in the beginning when the job is assigned, and the remaining 50% would be considered after the completion of the work, right? So that means, as far as this kind of activity is concerned, right from the very beginning, very first day of work on that activity is considered 50% complete, because we have already paid for it 50%. So we will consider it 50% complete, and this will remain 50% until it is completed. The day it is completed, the remaining 50% payment could be released, and that work can be considered as done. I hope that is understandable. There are other
Yep.
scenarios that you could, spell out your own rules, like you could have a 20-80 rule, or 30-70 rule, or 70-30 rule. This is all your discretion as a project manager, what kind of rule you want to apply to which activity or work package. For example, if an activity uh, is big enough to fit into what do you call it? You must specify a size that work package or that activity should generally be. If that work package or activity is bigger than that size, maybe you have a reporting cycle of 1 month. After every month, there is some progress, but most of the work packages should be smaller than 1 month. Do you agree with me? If we really
Yes.
have to submit a progress after a month, then your activities should be less than 1 month. Work packages should be less than 1 month. Okay, what if all the work packages are like 1 month, 2 month, 3 month, and your reporting cycle is 1 month? What will happen at the end of very first month? Nothing will be complete, right? And according to 0-100 rule, you will have to give a zero progress at the end of the month. Agree with me?
Yes.
Okay, how to deal with this situation? For example, if an activity is extended to 2 months, or a work package is extended to 2 months, although it should not be, we should have broken it down further. But if it cannot be broken down and it is extended to 2 months, then I can apply a 50-50 rule that by the start of that activity, we will start considering it 50% complete. And by the time the second month is complete, that activity should have been done and we would consider it 100% complete. You could even do the same kind of thing on an activity which is extended to 3 months, three reporting cycles. You could say 33% progress would be considered on the very first day for the whole month of first month. As soon as the first month is complete, without looking at what actually is the progress, you will start considering it 66% complete. And only when the third month is complete, and by that time the whole work has been completed, then we will start giving the progress of 100%. Same rule could apply to a activity extended to 4 months. We could have 25, 25, 25, and 25. So this is how you can spell out this rule according to your needs. But generally, we would consider that all work packages should be smaller than our reporting cycle. For example, if you think that your project has got larger work packages, maybe none of the work packages is less than a month, then you may consider to increase the size of your reporting cycle to 2 months or 3 months, right? So you will not have this problem that you have to kind of do these things. But naturally, this is your decision as a project manager, and the governance guidelines from the organization. What kind of rule you want to apply? If you don't know what kind of rule you have to devise, you may have to stick with the default, and that is 0-100 rule. I
Yep.
hope that is it. Okay, good. Okay, then what is the concept of a planning package? Planning package is not a work package, but it is something which we have broken down to this level. We know something has to be done here, but we do not exactly know the internal details of that. It is a specific case of rolling wave planning where we know what to do, but we don't know how to do it. So we have to wait for more information to become available. It cannot be converted into work packages until those information are available. And when they will become available, only then we will be in position to convert that work planning package into its requisite work packages. So we are not going to stop our planning. We are going to keep that planning package as a black box which will be explored further. So we will start doing other work. And when the time comes for this planning package, we would see if the necessary information has become available, and we can break it down into further details, further work packages. Only then those work packages like 1.1.2.1 could be created. These numbering system which I have used here, this is called WBS code or numbering system. That you may give this is your discretion what numbering system you want to use. Maybe you want to call your project as A and your control accounts as A.1, A.2, A.3. But generally, this is more comfortable that you call your project as 1 and control accounts could be 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, and then control accounts could be broken down directly into work packages or into planning packages. And and the numbering system will remain the same for work packages and planning packages, but those work packages which will further be created through rolling wave planning later would inherit their number from the planning package. Right? The work planning package was 1.1.2, and the work package coming out of it could be 1.1.2.1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. But this is just a guideline. You may or may not use it. You may devise your own numbering system. You may set up your own rules. I don't mind. But this is the general information about work breakdown structures. How do they look like, right? By default. And you can see the hierarchy here. It starts with the highest level, the project, and the lowest level here is the work package. So the basic rule for any kind of work breakdown structure could be you could break down the project in any way, but the lowest level of the work breakdown structure should be the work packages, which must be doable. Like in product breakdown structure, we could have done that. We could have said, okay, this in this project we are supposed to, build a car. So car is our main product, and car could be broken down into these five systems, and those five systems can be further broken down into these work packages. So the lowest level will not be a product then. At the work package level, we would have the work. Because if I break down a product, it will break down to the nuts and bolts. And I don't know what to do with these nuts and bolts. So, lowest level should not be the product, even if we are using the product breakdown structure philosophy in our work breakdown structure. The lowest level should be doing something. It should be a work package. So the basic rule of any work breakdown structure is that the lowest level should be a work package. As it is shown here, the hierarchy, highest level might be the project, and then you could have further breakdowns, could be phases, sub-phases, and things and like that. And ultimately, the lowest level will come out to be the work package. There might be planning packages in between, but the lowest level is work package because these are the work packages which is actually doable work. And if I can somehow create a list of all these work packages, that could be called our WBS dictionary. Like, we have a data dictionary. We could have a work breakdown structure dictionary. It could include all the work packages in this structure. And it can also add some data with it, what kind of a work it is, and who's responsible for it, and how much time and energy and resources are required to be done. All those columns are optional, but they could be there in the WBS dictionary. Now, you understand, we have created in scope the scope the scope statement, and then we created the WBS, and then we created the WBS dictionary. All of these three things are included in the scope baseline. They are all ingredients of scope baseline. Rather, you could always say that if there is a fourth and fifth element in the scope baseline, that may be the planning packages and the work packages, right? But they are anyways included in the WBS dictionary, and therefore you may or may not like to mention them separately. Got it? So this is the
Yeah,
general philosophy how a WBS can be created. Should I move ahead?
please do. Yeah.
Okay. How to decompose your work breakdown structure? I think I have already explained it in quite a bit of detail, but just look at these steps you could take. For example, it says identify the deliverables and the work needed to accomplish them. Structure and organize the WBS. Decompose high-level WBS scope components into low-level components. Develop and assign a unique identification code to each component from their code of accounts. Code of account means that the people who are providing you the funding, who are going to provide you the funds, they may not know the technical terms. Whatever the name you have given to a work package, they may not be conversant with it and they can confuse it. Therefore, this coding system, the numbering system which we have created, that is more so for the accounting purposes. That's why we call it code of account. This numbering system, this hierarchical numbering system, is code of account. The funding would be provided to maybe work package 1.2.1.1, right? So this is how the accounts people work with the work packages and their assignment of the funding. Review the decomposition of work packages and verify that they align with the project requirement. Now, this is very interesting that all the decomposition we have done down to the work package level, this must add up to the ultimate need, the business need of the project. Will the business need of the organization be met by doing all this? All these work packages, if they are done, will the purpose of the project will be resolved? Will it be accomplished? So you have to ensure that. If not, then you are missing something. You may have to add few more work packages to make sure that the purpose of the project, the objective of the project is achieved. Or if you have added certain work packages which you think are not really contributing to the organizational objective, they must be excluded from the work breakdown structure because they are unnecessary and they are out of scope. That is exactly why in scope statement we have explicitly defined in scope and out of scope, right? If something is out of scope, that must not take shape of a work package. And if you find any such thing, exclude that from the work breakdown structure. If all the work packages present in the WBS are unable to accomplish the objective of the project and new work packages need to be added, they must be added because otherwise we will not give 100% of the deliverable. Will not be able to give the 100% of the deliverable. I hope this makes sense.
Yes, it does.
Okay, this is as far as the decomposition of the WBS is concerned. As I told you about WBS dictionary, basically this is just a numbering system and the description of each one of the work packages which are actually the lowest level. So you could create a table, spreadsheet, which could give in first column it may have a WBS code identifier and the number assigned to it. Then the name of that activity or work package, a bit of description about it. Maybe if there are any associated assumptions or constraints, who is responsible for that? What scheduled milestone is it relevant to? Any associated schedule activities with that. I mean, I'm not talking about the sequence of activities, but I'm saying that kind of association. Later on, we will talk about the developing the network diagram and sequencing of the activities. But right now, we just want to have a general idea that this activity might impact or be affected by some other activity in the project. Resources required to complete the work. If at all you have this information, I'm not saying that you have to fill in all these columns and you don't even need to have all these columns present in the WBS dictionary. You tailor it according to your need, although these things will be done later. But if at all you have some idea about the resources, about the cost estimation, about the quality requirement, and especially acceptance criteria, this is something very important. For each WBS item, there must be a acceptance criteria. Like in Agile, we say that every user story must have an acceptance criteria. Similarly, we do need to have an acceptance criteria associated to every work package. Although in predictive projects, we are more concerned about the acceptance criteria of the whole product at the end of the day or at the end of the project, or you can say the phase, but still we do have acceptance criteria for every work package. So if at all you know that, you can also write it there. That is very much part of the scope. Any technical references, any agreement information, these are just kind of columns which could be added. But naturally, you can tailor it according to your need. And if you feel that you don't need so many things, you may at least the bare minimum version is a code number and an activity or WBS work package name. That is the minimum version of this WBS dictionary. But you can enhance this by adding some kind of information like this, which is shown here. And even beyond that, I'm not saying that these are all the information which can be added, but there could be more information or other information which you think is necessary from your organizational point of view. So you could create your own format for the WBS dictionary. So far, so good.
Yep.
Then comes the scope baseline. As I told you, the scope baseline would include the scope statement, which we have already created, the WBS, which we have just created, and the WBS dictionary. But because the WBS dictionary includes all the work packages and planning packages, so we consider all the work packages and planning packages to be part of our scope baseline. This is the only baseline which has so many components included in it. Whatever has been created after developing the scope management plan, we have included all of those things here. We included the scope statement, WBS, WBS dictionary, work packages, planning packages, all of them are considered components of the scope and scope baseline. And scope baseline um, is sealed. It is approved that, okay, customer and your bosses, they have agreed on this, that, okay, we agree with this WBS, we agree with these work packages, and now it is approved. When something gets approved, it becomes the scope baseline. So now your scope baseline includes all this information, and you are free to start planning further, like scheduling, estimating, resource assignments, and everything else you can do. You cannot do those things until and unless this scope baseline is available, is in an approved format. And this is only true for the predictive projects. In Agile, we don't work like that.
Correct.
Going to the next slide.
Don't just go back.
Okay.
So hang on. It says in the first paragraph, scope baseline equals scope statement WBS and WBS dictionary.
Yeah. That is the
Down
primary three things.
down
They're
down
the,
below it says work packages and planning packages
yeah.
also.
You see, work packages and planning packages are already part of the WBS dictionary, but
Yeah.
WBS dictionary, the basic definition is that only the work packages, right? But you see, the modern WBS dictionary is like everything which we have in the WBS in a textual tabular format. You put everything in a numbering format, right? All the work packages, all the planning packages, and everything would be apparently visible there. So that would be, I think that would be a good practice, but you must know that actually the work package is something which is doable, because when you are making your estimates, that would be based on the work packages. Whether it is duration estimate, it is cost estimate, or the resource estimate, that will depend on the work packages only. But anyways, these two entries, the work package and the planning package, this is kind of an optional thing. The basic ingredients of a scope of a scope baseline would be the scope statement, WBS, and WBS dictionary. These three are enough to do the work. But if you want to just explain it a little further, you could add work packages and planning packages also into it.
Yep. Clear.
Okay, moving on. It says don't forget to plan for transitions and handovers. Why? You remember we have talked about the transitions and handover. Once we are done with something, that has to be maybe installed into shifted to the customer premises, maybe installed there, maybe some provided, some training is to be provided, some handovers are required. So that all is actually included in the ultimate acceptance criteria. That is exactly why we refer to outputs and outcomes. Outputs are the deliverables which we are delivering to the customer, and outcomes are that they should be functional. We should get a blessing from the customer. Are they comfortable with it? Is it really working for them? And we would also facilitate them in the use of those things. and only then will they clear us that our job is done. So the final approval may be associated with the outcomes, not only with the outputs. Outputs are like, the physical products we have created, and I say, okay, I have done all the work. Now you do whatever you do with it. So yes, in some projects we deliver only the output, that is the product. In some projects, it is a contractual requirement that we should not only deliver the product, but we should make it functional and prove it works and hand it over, transition it to the customer. Only then it will be considered acceptable, right? So there is a matter of outcomes in it here. Anyways, it says include activities to fulfill transition and implementation in the scope of work. So wherever the matter of transition is there, we go beyond the outputs and we may be tied to the outcomes. And outcomes, as I told you earlier, they are the short-term benefits, very short-term benefits, which could be shown or proven immediately sometime after the project. I mean, the results should be visible as if the customer can give you the acceptance. So outcomes are those little small benefits which could be proof as if this thing does work. So it is part of the transition and handing over. Consider all stakeholders, schedules, risks, budgets, and quality standards. Identify deliverables and outputs. Questions to consider could be, will the work be new or an update in the business environment? These are, general questions. How best to transition the product into a live environment? Naturally, you might have faced this kind of situation where the new system has to replace an existing system, and you don't want to bother the live environment. You want to seamlessly interface with a live environment, thus shifting the whole way of working, right? Yes, that is possible, and naturally you are the best judge how do you do it. What about decommissioning or removing old systems, processes, or materials? What do you do in that case? Again, I would leave it to your judgment that you know that this system has to be decommissioned. It is not an addition. The product of my output is not an addition to an existing system, but it is going to completely replace the previous system. So when and how it should be decommissioned, how it should be removed, how the new process can be, introduced, and people are trained on them and they are comfortable with them. So this all you have been doing these things. Last question is, did you ensure training and knowledge transfer are complete and satisfactory? So yes, it is part of the transition that we should train the people who are taking over. We should transfer all the knowledge. Even we should transfer all the risks which are associated with that work in future. Right? During the life of the project, I had been taking care of all the risks, but there are risks which are going to continue over the life of the product. Therefore, we should transfer those issues, those risks also to them and tell them how to deal with them. Right? So this is your transition happening. And, these are the outcomes actually. These are not the outputs, these are the outcomes based on which you will get your acceptance. And the day you get your acceptance, the project is done. It is considered complete. So it all depends on the type of contract you are dealing with, whether we are going to be doing the transition or not. If it is a product which is acceptable, then probably we don't need to get into this. But if it is the outcome, the results, the short-term benefits, which have to be proven to the customer, then probably we have to get into this transition and handing over thing. When we talk about the agile or hybrid environment, we have a completely different system. And you are already aware about how the scope planning in an agile project is done in adaptive environments. We do have either increments or iterations working. So basically, we are doing that. We have the user stories. We propose them as an alternate way of viewing the requirements process. So basically, all the user stories sum up to be the total requirement of the project, right? The functionality and features we need in the project, they are actually being translated into very small user stories. And just like we had, work packages and then activities, here we don't have that kind of concept. We don't have requirements at all, but rather we call them user stories. And user story is a very small chunk of work which could comfortably be done within an iteration. If your iteration size is 2 weeks, naturally, just like I said, if you're in your predictive project, if your reporting cycle is on monthly basis, then your activities which are to be done during that must be shorter than 1 month, much shorter. Similarly, if your iteration size is 2 weeks, your user stories must be doable in much smaller the time than 2 weeks. So this is how our we do this in the agile projects, and naturally, even in a hybrid project, we still have at the bottom level at some kind of agile teams working. So probably these concepts are applicable to that. So we don't need a schedule, we don't need a sequencing, we need nothing like that. But we use this kind of a task board which is shown on the right hand side. It is just like creating a grocery list. You know, grocery list is the easiest example. Actually, Agile makes the things simple, and it removes all kinds of complications. You go for a shopping, you just create a grocery list that, okay, I have to do this. I have to buy all of these items. And then you start moving around in the various shops, and you start buying those things and you start ticking those things which have been done. Actually, that is the basis of this philosophy of task board. To-do list is your complete list of work you need to do in progress, which you are currently doing, which you are currently shopping around for, and done, which has been purchased, right? So rather than creating a schedule and a bar chart and a Gantt chart and the sequence and critical path, there are no such complications in Agile. We don't care for them, right? We just go by the simple principle. We keep it simple. And the simplicity is.
Can I just clarify that? So in my mind, an experience, and
Mhm.
maybe this is saying the same thing. Um, what uh, we would have scope for an agile project
Mhm.
would be you would have a you'd have some overall vision statement or something. Um,
That is
you definitely.
like a charter or a business case. Vision statement is like a charter or a business case.
But in agile language, what is it that you have at the first document?
First document is vision statement.
Yeah. So you'd have a vision statement that would be a precursor to the scope. Um,
Uh-huh.
uh, you'd have some kind of um, and I don't know what the order of this is, but you'd
Mm.
have some sort of scope
Uh-huh.
at the superset, not a baseline, but
Mm.
scope written down
Mm.
in terms of either a roadmap, or maybe you'd start with features or some capabilities
Mm.
put into a roadmap, and then you'd have user stories that would
Mm.
be subordinate to the features. And I realize there's epics, capabilities, features, user stories hierarchically,
Yep.
but I'm just trying to clarify. Did I miss a slide here where it kind of just clarifies where scope comes from? And I
Mm.
realize scope baseline is a totally different animal when it
Yep.
comes to agile. There is a scope baseline in terms of the sprint, let's say, what goes into the Kanban or whatever you want to call that thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's an initial scope for that 2 weeks or 3 weeks of a sprint. And then, every endeavor should be taken to try and achieve that sprint and the user stories in it. And then you do another scope for the next sprint and you do another scope. So changes is fluid, it's constant, it's
Mm-hmm.
continuous, I should say. Um, so this seems a little bit too short a statement, this slide. Am I missing a slide here
No,
prior
no, no.
or to come?
Actually, let me explain one thing to you. Even in a predictive project, when we have a business case, there is a scope in the business case. You agree with me? It may be very
Yeah, there should be something in there about scope for
exactly,
sure, right?
exactly. Precursor to a scope or something like some idea of the scope, and then when you have the charter. Charter does also represent some kind of scope, which is a little bit more detailed because now you are sure that we are going to do it. So that is more in more concrete terms, but still it is summarized. Moreover, you move on and you start developing the scope, and in the scope statement, the things start becoming really very clear, right? And then we baseline the scope. In predictive project, this can happen, but how do you translate it into agile environment? In agile environment, there is no concept of a charter. We are not really referring back to the business case, but we have a vision statement. This vision statement is something like a charter and a business case, or you can say something in between these two things. That is the vision statement that includes the original and basic vision, basic scope of the project. And this is also considered as a charter because this is the authorization to the project manager to start the work. Now, where is the scope? You are right in saying that every iteration selects their own scope, but that is not the complete statement. If you do not consider the iterations, where is the scope of the project, agile project? Where is the whole scope at any one point in time? There is an artifact.
The whole scope that's a good question because the product backlog is constantly being groomed or created, right?
Yes.
So it's not that.
It is not the product
Uh,
backlog.
no, because well, it may not be because surely the product backlog is an evolving animal that
Yeah.
doesn't cover the entire scope
So
yet.
the agile in agile scope is supposed to be evolving. You
Yes.
can't have a firm scope in an agile project. So I said at any one point in time, what is a document you can look at to look at the whole picture by that time? And that is the product backlog. Product backlog is your whole scope so far. But it will evolve. There will be changes to it. There will be deductions. There will be increments to it. New things will be added to it. So it will keep evolving over time. But at any one point in time, when you want to look at your whole scope, the current whole scope is in the product backlog. Do you agree with me?
Um, if you define the product backlog
Mhm.
as a collection of user stories that are well documented,
Yes.
um, I don't agree with you entirely. I know what you're saying
Uh-huh.
theoretically,
Mhm.
um, but yeah, maybe I need to get my head around it and think about that harder because I know when I ran agile projects,
Mhm.
we were always at a long list of um,
User
items
story.
that we needed to document as user stories, and we were
Right.
always playing catch up, saying,
Uh-huh.
okay, well, we know that there's probably 1,000 user stories. We've
Mhm.
got 200 of them written down well. And then we've
Okay.
got another 200 of them that are not written down well, but we've drafted them. And then
Yes.
there's another 600 that we haven't got past one sentence, just one sentence to say what
Yeah.
it is. And
Exactly.
that's it. And we don't know. we haven't written it down and we haven't discussed it with the product owner hasn't discussed it with the users or the team adequately yet but we know there's going to be out of that 600, there's going to be a few hundred at least coming out of that. So
Yes.
that's the reality I
Yeah,
notice when I
exactly.
run agile projects.
My point is, at that point in time when you were doing that, this was the whole scope of your project. At that point, up till the information available at that point, that was all the work. But later on, it may change. Something will be deleted from the list, something will be added to the list. So the very next day, your whole project scope is going to change and it will keep evolving. And there might be a day when the customer says, okay, whatever has been done so far is good enough for me. I don't want other elements of the product backlog to be completed. Let's close the project right here. So all those items which are undone and which are of very low priority may be just eliminated from the product backlog and the project could be declared as closed. Naturally with the consent of the customer. It is the customer request that I don't need any more, right?
Yep.
This can be
Okay.
done. So at any point, if somebody asks you what is the scope of your project, you could say the best I can give you is the product backlog. So far, what I know, this is the total scope of my project. But because, as you said, we are not confirmed about it keeps changing, it's versatile, it is changing all the time. So you have to check back again, and again to see what is the current status of scope at any one point in time. But the only document you could refer back to is the product backlog. Second thing,
Okay.
as far as you said the iteration is concerned, actually iteration is picking up the work from that big basket of product backlog, right? So the scope of that iteration is very limited. You cannot call it the scope of the project. This could just be a scope of the iteration, and that is not on what all we have to do. That is what all we can do, right? So it is not an assignment that you have to complete all these 10 user stories. If they have picked up 10 user stories, they have decided it all by themselves. Nobody forced them to do 10 stories. And if they could not complete those 10 stories, nobody is going to ask them why you did not do it, because it is a self-organizing team. Self-organizing team applies its own correction. They say, okay, we thought we could do 10 user stories, but we could do 9. Why? They do the retrospective and they learn a lesson from it. And they say, okay, we understand that our collective capability is not really doing 10 user stories. We can do only this much. And therefore, in the next iteration, we could take that into account. And that's how they keep learning over time. So I am not really comfortable calling it the scope of an iteration, because a scope of an iteration means that you have to complete all of that work. But this is not really the scope. If you say it from the team's point of view, they have ascertained something to be their scope that they can do 10 user stories. I may agree with it, but this cannot be shared with the customer, that this has been forced by the customer or the team lead or the product owner that you have to do these 10 user stories. So I would not call them the scope as such.
Yep.
Okay, moving
Fine.
on. Moving on, let us talk about the release and iteration planning. I suppose if you are really clear about these things, we can skip it. Release planning comes when? It comes after we have the vision statement with us and the product owner starts communicating with the customer, and he starts collecting some of the requirements. With those broad requirements, he could and the contract terms which are with the customer, they could create a timeline which could be the product, kind of a outline plan for the delivery, and that could be shaped into a release plan. For example, customer wants on certain dates certain releases to be, you know, handed over to the customer. So we could fix those dates on the release map and say, okay, just like we have phases in a conventional project, we are not really tied to the phases here. Phases are work oriented, but releases are just like phases, but they are not work oriented. They are product oriented. What are we going to deliver by the end of first release? What is the date for the first release? And then the next release, and then the next release. So generally speaking, from the product backlog and the common understanding of what is to be done in this project, we have created a release baseline. Release map has been created. Now, looking at the size of various releases, because all the releases are not going to be equal in size, just like iterations. One release could be 6 months after the start of the project. The next release could be of another 3 months long. Another release could be 2 months long. This all depends on the desire of the customer when those releases are to be handed over to the customer. So releases are in no way like iterations. They do not have a cadence. They do not happen after an equal interval. Do you agree with me or not?
What was the last thing you said there?
I am saying the releases are not all of equal size.
Correct.
Correct. Very good. So if
Yeah.
you understand that, say your project is spread over a year and your releases are like, 4 months, 3 months, and then 2 months, and then whatever. So how does it help you determine the size of an iteration? What should be the size of your iteration in this project? What method will you use to determine the size of your iteration? Because this is the time, once you have created the release map, you now can determine the size of your iteration. And generally, it should be 2 to 4 weeks.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, you see, well, maybe you've answered it there, right? So in reality, sorry, in theory, you would have your iteration is time boxed and you fix the time.
Hmm?
Um, so you don't allow that to
Change.
slip.
Yes.
Yeah. And you say, let's say 2 weeks would be quite mature. Maybe
Okay.
a week is even more mature.
Hmm.
And you just make sure that then you prioritize the high priority user stories to go
Hmm.
into the iteration successively. So you're always
Hmm.
trying to pick the higher ones.
Okay.
Um, and then you just fit the effort
Hmm.
that backlog, that iteration backlog, if that's the right word,
Hmm.
into that space and time, and you don't try to overload it too much. You can stretch the team, but you don't try to you make sure you understand that.
Good.
By the way, my experience is that again that iterations it's a good that you say that, right? Because that it could be 2, 3, or 4 weeks. That in a
Hmm.
new sort of agile environment, it may be 3 weeks initially and 2 weeks later on.
Okay, I'll debate on that later. But first of all, let me give you one. Naturally, if you talk about disciplined agile, I would say yes to it. But if you are talking about normal agile, then probably it should not happen. All your iterations must be of the same size. You decide it once in the beginning of the project, and then your iteration size should not change. Well, there could be situations where you can change your iteration size, and disciplined agile provides a mechanism for that. It says that you select your way of working in the beginning of the project and you start doing your project, and later you realize that you can improve your way of working and you can completely revise the mechanism from that point onwards. So, in only in that case, I would say yes, the iterations may vary after you have changed your way of working during the life of a project. But if that is not happening, then iteration size, there is no way the iteration size can be changed during the life of a agile project. That is my understanding of that.
Yep, that's
Con-
fine.
Considering that to be the truth, let us say, let me give you an example. Uh, you have a contract with a customer on an adaptive project, and this is generally they think that this could be done in a month, in a year. The first release point is after 4 months. Just write it down. 4 months. Next release point is another 3 months, then 1 month, and then 2 months, and then again 2 months. Are we done with 12 months now? I did not write it.
Sorry. Okay, you want me to write this down? Do it again.
No, I can do it. 4 months plus 3 months plus 1 month plus two. Yeah, this is 12 months, right? So this is the release map. Generally, we understand that customer thinks we can deliver it in 1 year, and these are the release points they have given us, and we have created a release map. Now, looking at that release map, what is your choice? What is the best choice for the size of your iteration? Because that is the point where you decide what is going to be your iteration size. And you decide it once, you
Uh,
can't change it.
well, I would say you'd pick therefore the 1 month, and you'd
Hmm.
understand that in 1 month you've already got, you mentioned 43122. I think that was what you said. The
Hmm.
third one, the third release is 1 month. So I would make that at least 2 weeks per
Very good.
sprint. Yeah.
Very good. Very good.
You could
That is,
again, if you're a highly mature environment,
hmm,
you could have 1 week, but
very good.
2 weeks. 2 weeks is best because 3 weeks doesn't
Exactly.
make any sense there.
Very good. Because 3 week cannot be divided. If it is a 1 month, portion, then you can't have 3 weeks. You just have either 2 2 weeks or 4 1 weeks, right? Three does not fit into it.
Or you
So
could have one 4 week, which doesn't sound right.
that doesn't sound right, right? So that means, from perspective of these release dates, you assume that you will have your iteration of 2 weeks, and if it is a very sensitive project, you may like to have it on 1 week basis. Agreed?
Yep.
So say we pick 2 weeks, but now it has been cast in stone. That is the only thing which has been cast in stone, that your iteration size is going to be 2 weeks, right? Now tell me, how many 2 week iterations would be there during the first release? First
Uh,
release is four
in,
months.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then I'd have to work out exactly that, but because
Just consider
eight.
that every month is 4 weeks, right? Just
Okay. Well, then
consider
there's eight. There's eight. One, two,
eight.
three, four,
Yes.
five, six, eight. Yeah, eight.
First is
Yeah,
eight, second is
is
six,
six.
and then is two, and then is
Then
four,
it's
and then is
two.
four.
Then it's four, and then it's four.
So from the current, the shape of the product backlog, they think that these number of iterations can be there. But you see, the number of iterations can change over time. The size of iteration will not change. The number of iterations can change over time. And interestingly, your release points can also shift forward or backward. Release points are not fixed because contract is not important than the customer. If customer desires that they want to add certain requirements to a release and the release date may be shifted forward, then probably we will do it, right? The only thing which is fixed is the size of the iteration. Do you agree with me?
Yep,
So
I agree.
that thing is called the release planning, where you decide the number of iterations or sprints needed to complete each release, features contained
Yep.
in the release. Now, this is very interesting. If the at the end of 4 months, first release, are supposed to deliver certain things, right? So that means automatically that those things are of higher priority than others. Agreed?
Yep.
So out of the product backlog, I will develop a release backlog for first release and bring up those items which contribute to the completion of first release. That means we could have a release backlog for every release, right? And that is going to borrow from the main product backlog. So product backlog will be divided into various release backlogs, and iterations could be fed either directly from the product backlog or from the relevant release backlog. That is your decision whether you want to do it this way or that way. But if you have to stick to your release dates and release map, probably it would be a good practice to develop release backlog, and from the release backlogs you then create your iteration backlogs, and that would be done from on iteration to iteration basis. You can't create all the iteration backlog right up front. No, we'll do it iteration by iteration. You agree with that?
Yep.
Okay, this release planning is done now. Now we can move on to the iteration planning or the sprint
Can
planning,
I
we
ask
call
you,
it.
sorry, can I ask you a quick question?
Yes.
In release, my understanding is a release is also an increment. Is that
No,
your understanding?
no. Release is not an increment. Increment always have a fixed size. Releases do not have a fixed size. If at all you want to relate release with something, that is the phases in a predictive project are equivalent to releases in an adaptive project. But the only difference is the phases of a predictive project are work oriented, whereas releases of a adaptive project are, product oriented. So they are one and the same thing. It's the same concept. There we call them phases, here we call them releases. And they are not of equal size, therefore they are not iterations at all. So moving on to the iteration planning itself, naturally that is sprint happening, and you very well understand that when a team goes for their iteration, they first of all, even before starting an iteration, they go to the product backlog. Product owner must have gathered a lot many user stories there. They help them refine those user stories. If there are some epics, they help the product owner to break them down into the appropriate size of a user story. Got it? That is the
Yep.
team working on it. So this thing where they plan these things and they do initial sorting, this may be considered as iteration 0, the planning iteration. I'm not talking about the sprint iteration. This is the very initial iteration, or there might be a couple of iterations happening in the planning time when we are trying to sort out the product backlog. Once that has been sorted out, then the team starts working for looking at the iteration. They say, okay, we are going for the iteration. This is the prioritized backlog in front of us, and we have this much capability. So we together, the 10 people, we together can handle this much workload. And that workload could be counted in certain number of user story points. Story points, you have heard about it?
Yes.
Okay. So every user story will be allocated certain number of difficulty level, hardness level, or complexity level. So one user story could be eight story points, another could be 28 story points, another could be 2 story points. So team says, okay, we are collectively capable of undertaking, say, 80 story points in one iteration. For example, so they start picking from the top. The first story was 8. So they say, okay, we can do it. Then is 28. They say, okay, now it is 36 points. Okay, what next? Then we have got 2 points. That makes it 38. And so on. They keep adding it until they are close to their capacity. Their capacity was 80. Maybe they took up 76 points, and the next story was kind of 10 points, story points long. They say, okay, stop. Don't pick up the new story and just pick up these many. So when they count these stories, they come out to be 7. They commit to the product owner that we want to take them away to our iteration backlog. Please allow us. And this is exclusively the choice of the team. Product owner has nothing to say about it. He can't say, no, don't pick this story, pick another story, because they are already in an order of prioritization. One thing can be done, and that is the 8th story, which is 10 story point long. We may negotiate with the product owner and say, okay, we can't pick the 8th user story. Can we pick the 9th one, which is 3 story points, and that fits into our thing? So if he allows that, we can then have 80 story points collected, and we can take them to our iteration backlog. Now we physically move these 7 or 8 stories from out of the backlog. They are no more part of the backlog, product backlog, and we place them in the iteration backlog. What does that mean? The product backlog is open for interaction or changes by the customer, but the stories which have been moved to the iteration backlog, they are no more available in product backlog, and therefore they cannot be changed. During the course of the iteration, they cannot be changed. Customer cannot change those requirements, those user stories which have been committed by the team, and they have been taken to the iteration backlog. They have no authority to change them. This is the only restriction we are putting on our customer, that you can change anything in the product backlog, but not what we are working on. And moreover, whatever was the acceptance criteria agreed for those user stories at that point in time will also be frozen. Client can't say that, okay, I think I have changed my acceptance criteria, so I don't accept it. No, they have to accept it on the acceptance criteria which was agreed at that point before we picked up the stories. But they are at liberty to change any acceptance criteria for those items which are still lying in the product backlog. They can change the user stories, they can change the requirement, they can change the acceptance criteria, but not for those items which have been committed for the iteration, and the iteration will start. So no changes to those stories and their acceptance criteria during the life of the iteration. Agreed?
Yep.
So that is done, I think. Review the high prioritized user stories or key outcomes, ask questions, agree on effort required to complete the user story, and that effort is in the story points. And determine the activities required to deliver the iteration objective. Now, iteration objective is not scope. Iteration objective is whatever you have picked up, those 7 or 8 stories you have picked up, they become your iteration objective. So if you want to call it from iteration point of view, that is, it is your scope of the iteration, I don't mind. But classically speaking, this is not the scope of the project. This is the scope of the iteration, and that has not been given by anyone. That is selected, chosen by the team themselves. So this is an internal matter This is not to be dealt like the predictive scope. This is not that kind of scope. This is the internal scope determined by the team itself that we can handle this much work. And this can change also. In the next iteration, they may not be, maybe they are unable to do 80 user stories and they decide from the next iteration we will do only 60. Or maybe they could do 80 stories in half the time and they are left with the time. They will pick up new user stories from the product backlog at right during the iteration, and maybe they end up completing 120 story point and they learn that yes, we can do more. So they will decide in the next iteration that okay, because we are capable of 120 user stories, so from now on we will focus on 120 user stories. And in the next iteration, they will go for that. And at the end of every iteration, when they do the retrospective, they may keep revising this figure of story points. And ultimately, after around 6 iterations, this rate becomes stabilized, and then it is called the team velocity. This is the team velocity, 160 story points or 80 story points or whatever. So that is called the team velocity. And team velocity normally stabilizes after 5 or 6 iterations. And then you have comparatively a stable figure which you can blindly follow in future. That is why we call it continuous, we call it sustainable delivery. We sustain the same pace throughout the project. At least the minimum pace could be the same. But as we understand about the continuous improvement, we also understand our pace we may be able to pick up our pace in future. We will sustain anyways, but we may improve our pace over time. I hope you understand this point.
Yes, I do.
Very good. So I think I'm done with this slide. Is it okay?
Yep. Can you define what an increment is? So,
Okay. A increment is usually we did talk about did we not talk about the increment and iterative and incremental?
maybe.
Okay.
Uh,
Let
but yeah, like is a like an iteration is a fixed period. Is an increment also a fixed period, which
yes, yes,
delivers a set planned value?
yes.
Um, okay,
Classically,
and then does the value does there need to be a release at the end of each increment,
mm,
or within that period
mm,
of the increment, or is there a case where you could have zero release coming out of an increment?
okay. As far as the iteration is concerned, okay, first of all, the size of the increment is also going to be constant, is the same. If you select 2 weeks, it is going to be 2 weeks. But well, it could differ in the philosophy you're working on. I'll discuss about that later. But for the time being, how does the iterative work? I'm trying to build a cycle. I build a part of the cycle in first iteration, another part in the next iteration, but none of the parts I am building is the complete cycle. Until the complete cycle is complete, manufactured, none of the parts can individually be of any use, but they will increment towards the whole cycle. You agree with that?
Yeah.
This is called incremental. But although maybe when I delivered the wheel of the cycle, they may start using it to play around or do some experiment. So yes, this could be called as a uh, minimum viable product. If that part of the product which is coming out of an iteration is of any use to anyone and they want to start using it, that could be called a minimum viable product. Agreed?
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about the increment. Increment is trying to develop a complete workable solution at the end of an increment. For example, you are painting Mona Lisa, and Mona Lisa picture has been divided into 9 parts. The first part is completely final with all the coloring and everything. I deliver one of the 9 parts of, of the painting, which is complete in all aspects. It's just a matter of putting them all together to complete the Mona Lisa after 9 iterations. But every increment will deliver a finished product. If I take the same example of Mona Lisa painting for an iterative project, it could be paint you acquire a frame and you build that frame and you kind of do the base color on it, and then you draw a sketch on it. These are all separate iterations going on, but at the end of every iteration there is nothing which is ultimately final. The ultimate final painting would come at the end of all the iterations where the painting will be completely displayed. But you see, in increment, what is happening is the part of the painting, the one box of the painting which has been delivered at the end of first increment is completely final with all the colors and everything, no touching required. It is complete. And then the next part, the next part, and all of these parts can be joined by the customer and it would be the whole painting. Or maybe in the final increment, you join all of them together. I hope that
Okay. So
makes
you're
sense.
saying you're saying, yeah, okay, you could have 9 increments to create the Mona Lisa.
Mhm, mhm. And
That's what you're saying.
every increment creates the final product.
Yeah, the final product being 1/9 of the total
Yes,
solution.
exactly, exactly.
If there's 9 increments and they're 3 months per increment, then you're talking just over 2 years.
Yes,
And then you've got your Mona Lisa. And then
exactly.
in each increment, assuming the increments are 3 months, in each increment, assuming a month is 4 weeks, you've got 6 iterations.
Yes. No, no. You are, you are trying to make a difference between iteration and increment. The increment would also be like an iteration. It was the size of the increment would be just like the iteration. It is not that increments are separate and iterations are separate. Either you are working on iterations or you are working on increments. Both do not exist together,
So
right?
you're
So
saying,
your increment will be 2 weeks, just like iteration. But having said that, there could be scenarios where I would like to agree with you that you could have, your increment size to be like 3 months, which is not really feasible. This is too big a time for an increment. But yes, maybe that can happen. But then
right,
there
well,
would
maybe I'm
be,
mixing up methodologies here because I remember when I studied, I thought I was studying SAFe, that we
okay.
were we were looking at, we time boxed our iterations
Hmm.
um, very clearly, like you said, but then we had iterations of 2 weeks with program increments of three
Oh,
months and then we
that.
had releases,
Mm,
ideally releases, at least one release per program increment, but maybe
uh-huh.
two or three.
Okay.
And
Hmm.
then and those releases were where we were releasing to the customer something, minimal viable product or better, and that was being deployed within that
Hmm.
program increment.
Right. Actually, you are talking about a scaled environment. right? In safe, you're talking about a scaled environment where the thing
Yes.
is going on at the project level, and then something is going on at the program level, and something going on at the portfolio level. Well, I may agree that in that case, the project thing is called iteration. Program may be iterative or maybe incremental. So maybe in the example you are giving me is the project was iterative and the program was incremental. So project iterations are delivering to the increments of the program, and ultimately it is being scaled up and things like that. I would say yes, that is very much possible. But what I was discussing was specific to a single, single project, a single assignment, not a scaled up kind of a thing, right? So in a project, in an adaptive project, which is not scaled up, you could have only one thing, either the iterations or the increments. But if it is a scale
Right.
up factor, I
And okay,
fully agree.
okay, I get you now. We're on the same page. So just to be clear here, in a non-scaled, just specific, we got one Scrum team, and they're focused on doing so they do. Are you saying that they could do iterations or increments, or can they
Yes.
do iterations and increments while with an iteration being a regular sprint and an increment being a regular sprint deploying
Well,
something?
in this environment, I would recommend that you resort yourself to one method, either iterations or increments, and that is your decision how you want to do it. Maybe the need for the project will dictate whether you have to go iterative or you have to go incremental. But the sizes are almost the same, philosophy is the same, but only the delivery is different, right? I suppose that in a classic case, you cannot use iterations and increments together. But if at all it is a kind of a complex environment, we may try to make space for them, but I don't see a chance.
Okay, clear.
But in a scaled environment, it is very much possible. It is very much
But
possible.
we don't discuss scaled in this
Yeah, not at all. Not at
course.
all.
Okay.
Okay, so we are done with the release and iteration planning. Uh, I suppose we could have a break because I have to go for prayers.
Okay.
Give me 15 minutes.
Sure.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Most welcome. Peter, are you there? Peter, you there?
Yes, I am. Just
Good,
back.
good, good.
Perfect. Okay. And is my connection good? Can you hear me all the time clearly, or is it breaking up sometimes?
No, no, it's fine. It's very fine.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody on Friday and they couldn't hear me very well. So I was curious, was it always breaking up or was that just a bad moment?
With me, you are very fine.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Okay, as far as the backlogs are concerned, we have already talked about them. We have got the product backlog, we have got the release backlog, we have got the iteration or sprint backlog, and probably that's all about a simple project, a simple agile project. We just have this kind of environment. So product responsibility of creating the backlog, product backlog is with the product owner. That is the main backlog, and this guy is responsible for that. Team may work with him for refining the backlog or prioritizing the backlog or grooming the backlog, but basically this remains the responsibility of the product owner to interact with the stakeholders and the customer and keep this product backlog updated. Uh, a product owner and team collaborate. That's what I have just said. Backlog may be known by slightly different names on your team or project, but the names are generally descriptive. So people in some of the methodologies may call it a requirement backlog, like in disciplined agile, they don't call it backlog at all. They call it work items. They call it work items, right? Then we have the sprint backlog. In some lean methodologies, they call it a lean backlog, things like that. So don't be confused with these, but they are one and the same thing. Then we have got the user stories, which you very well understand what they are. But do you understand what is a story map?
Sorry, can you just go back one slide?
Yes.
Just clarify something. So there's only two backlogs. There's product backlogs and sprint backlogs.
There
And
release
in a
backlog also. There are release backlogs also.
multiple product backlogs
Hmm.
in any activity, right? Or any of these projects, yeah?
Hmm.
So you could have 10 product backlogs, and then you could have ultimately 50 sprint backlogs and 10 release backlogs and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, but why do you have 10 product backlogs? You will have only one product backlog in one project. If you are having a scaled up version, then you can have 10 backlogs for 10 different projects governed by
Okay,
a
right.
program. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, great. Thank you. We can move
Wonderful.
on.
Okay. Next is the user stories. You know what the user stories are? Do you have a concept about the story map? When you're
I
prioritizing, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, to me, is a story map is um, the journey towards building something that's viable, a
Mm-hmm.
minimal viable product, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's and then onwards to something that you want to release. So it makes a
Right.
logical connect, or also the dependencies between certain stories,
Exactly.
which I guess is the same thing. But yeah, like I remember drawing these things on boards
Yes.
and using sometimes pieces of string or something like that. But that was only really just a game to play because we needed
Mm.
technology really to capture it. But
Right.
the way we did it was what is the kind of core line of a story
Yes.
map, and then also um, bringing into that other stories were dependent or linked
Exactly.
more tentatively to something. Um, so
Right.
we kind of color coded them a bit, but essentially
Exactly.
you could see the whole story
Yep.
gather itself up over multiple sprints.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that is that the idea. So then you're
Yes. So that means that the product backlog has to be converted into story maps. Product backlog just shows a single stack of prioritized requirements. Single stack. That means that the topmost story should be done, and then the next story, and then the next story, and so on and so forth. But in practice, that might not be possible. For example, the highest prioritized item, highest prioritized user story, to complete that, you might have to do three other user stories because they are the prerequisite to that story. So those stories, those three stories, which are nowhere in the priority of the customer, have to come first because that they are the natural sequence to reach that desired user story. So this is
right,
not,
but
yeah.
let me add something here, which I'm probably wrong on. But again, in my language, there was a hierarchy that there was stories that led to a feature that
Mhm.
led to that all those features together, let's
Yes.
say, created a product.
Yeah. Yep. It
So
is
is that
like
the same idea here? So you've got multiple story maps, if you will, or you got one story
exactly,
map with multiple
exactly.
threads through it.
Multiple threads through it. Yes. There are
Okay, so it's one
dependencies.
it's
Yeah.
one story map with multiple threads through it. Is that the idea? You don't have
Yeah.
multiple story maps.
Well, you can have multiple storylines, but you see, because you're doing one iteration at a time, so therefore, what you said is more applicable. That there is a major one thread going on, and that is telling you the general sequence. Well, I can relate this sequencing in the roadmap, in the story maps, to the network diagram in predictive project. In a network diagram of predictive project, the things are tied up. All the activities are tied to each other with some kind of dependency. We are not that much binding in agile. We are not everything is not tied up like that. We are rather working on the priority of the work given to the by the customer, and we don't have everything connected, but some of the things will have to be done in a sequence. They will form a flow, a line in which those user stories should be completed in a sequence. And naturally, you are very right in saying that that may impact other stories as well. There might be some little bit of dependency, but don't try to create a network diagram or a critical path in Agile. That is not possible because everything is not linked. The only viable linkage is the prioritization of the project is a single stack, right?
Okay, just one thing. Is there one story map with
Mhm.
multiple threads, or can there be multiple story maps?
Basically, there could be one. Basically, there could
Okay.
be one.
Okay.
But I'm not talking about the complex situation or the scaled project. In a scaled factor, you may have many storylines, story maps going on, storylines going on simultaneously in different projects.
Yeah, gotcha. All right.
Okay, so here we can relate the user stories, story maps, and the roadmap, which is the main thing, roadmap. We started with that. And this is thing which you were talking about. The epics are broken down into features, and features are broken down into further features. And you could have user stories within each feature, right? So there could be a user story which could represent the whole feature, or a feature could be divided into more than one user stories. You understand my point? It is not necessary that every user story represents a complete feature.
Correct.
There might be user stories, maybe three user stories together would ultimately be able to accomplish that one feature. Got it? For
Yep.
example, the top two features, these are the user stories. This feature, there's one feature here and one feature here. One feature is having two user stories, one feature is having three user stories. And in the third feature, it says in activities includes activities and efforts such as documentation, bug fixes, and things like that. So the user stories are part of this is one feature. This is one feature which is accomplished by these three user stories, right? Whereas there might be one feature which certain user stories are catching up with certain features of that, and certain user stories are completing the remaining feature, and ultimately the whole feature would be completed. So, as you said, feature is a higher version, a higher level than the user story itself. A feature could be represented by a couple of stories or could be represented by more than one mini features with having their own set of user stories. And epics are naturally, there's a long statement by the customer, a long story, rather a whole novel given by the customer. They are trying to give you what all they require, right? But those big requirements may not be doable as user stories. They have to be broken down into a number of user stories. Maybe as such, in Agile, we don't really, talk a lot about the feature. We talk specifically about the user stories, but you are right, because we have to understand which user stories are contributing to the accomplishment of which feature. That is exactly why we need to have those features clearly mapped somewhere. But practically speaking, when we are doing the agile, we are actually doing the user stories, right? And naturally, we should understand that the accomplishment of these two user stories will meet up the requirement of this feature, and so on and so forth. For example, these epics, they could ultimately be broken down to user stories, and one epic may represent More than one feature. One epic may represent more than one features. So for the
Sure. I would have thought that that's the definition of an epic in a sense, or a characteristic, I should say, that
Mhm.
an epic would always have more than one feature.
Of course,
Or
of
it
course.
might be 1.5 features or something, right? But it's going to have more than one.
Yeah, definitely. It is supposed to be having more than one. Otherwise, it is not an epic, and every feature can further be subdivided into user story.
Yeah. Okay.
Then we have the prioritization and refinement. I think we have talked a lot about the prioritization and refinement of the backlog. We have the terminology of prioritization of the backlog. What is refinement of the backlog? Can you explain to me? What is the difference between prioritization and refinement?
Yes, I know that. So prioritization, I thought, was where you'd say these are the higher value ones to deal with.
Mhm.
And then refining it might be where you have to make some changes to accommodate the either the timing or the effort to fit it
Mhm.
into the time box, and or potentially there might be some logic to bringing one forward or pushing it backwards in the sprint cycle,
Mhm.
because of a dependency or so on.
Who is responsible for breaking the epics into stories? And what is that process called?
Shit. So I got it wrong. Good point. Um, okay, so that's refinement. Okay, so that's breaking. All right, I was thinking of different word. So all right, okay, so that's refinement is taking it from epics down to features, down to user stories.
Yes, yes. So you're breaking them down, and then you are prioritizing them, right? There is another term which is called grooming. When it is done, and what does it do? Grooming.
That's
Yes.
okay. Grooming the backlog is is continuously reviewing the backlog, and then is it doing what I just said earlier on was
Mhm.
refinement? Is it where you're making sure that you understand it from a scope and estimate perspective and a dependency perspective, so that you then can so you define it clearly, you estimate it clearly, you prioritize it clearly, and you put it into the correct sprint
Mhm.
um, correctly. Is that grooming?
Well, let me explain it in my way, my words. But refinement and prioritization happens when you create the product backlog for the very first time. After every iteration, when you go back to the product backlog and you need to sort out new requirements and refine them and prioritize them and groom them. Grooming, the term grooming comes for subsequent efforts of reprioritizing the backlog and refining the backlog. So after every iteration, the team goes back to the product backlog, they fix the issues, they reprioritize it, they groom it. Grooming, you might understand that you groom the bushes outside your home as if they do not grow out of proportion. You cut them from above a specific level. That is grooming. So you are going to be grooming after maybe every week. So here we are doing it after every iteration. We go back, look into the backlog, see if there is anything wrong, if there are any bushes to be cut, if they have to be refined, they have to be prioritized. So all the subsequent efforts after the first prioritization and refinement, after every iteration, we go back and we groom the backlog.
Based on lessons learned and stuff like that, that we underestimated,
No,
overestimated,
no, no, no.
our velocity is changing.
No, no. It is the
Um,
same exercise as refinement and prioritization for the first time. We are doing the same exercise, but only on the changed items, new items in the product backlog. We are not talking about the user stories and other things. We are just grooming. We are we you know we have completed a number of user stories and we have delivered them, right? And we are now going back to the product backlog. By the time we got there, after this iteration, there might be 10 new requirements piled up there which are unsorted, which are unrefined. So I'll help them, the team will help the product owner to refine those requirements, to prioritize those requirements into the stack. So basically, this is not as big an effort as the initial prioritization and refinement, but this is a little effort which can be done after every iteration. Anything new which has been added to the requirement that needs to be refined and prioritized. So that subsequent effort after every iteration is called grooming the backlog. Got it? You plant a bush, a lot of effort is required into that. Then it grows out and
So
then reaches a
yeah.
level. And then you
So
groom it after every week.
okay. So you refine it is done as a one-off at the beginning,
Mhm.
and then you groom it is the kind of
Exactly.
continual refining, if you
Continual.
will.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Continual refining and continual prioritization. Subsequently, it is called the grooming. Okay,
Good.
and
Thank you.
we already understand why do we split epics into user stories. I don't need to explain that, isn't it?
No, that's fine.
Okay. Another question comes to my mind. Can we split a user story?
Yes, you can.
Okay. And
You
but
should do that as you document a user story. If you find that uh, is really two user stories, then you should do that, and that is recommended, right? Isn't it? That you
yeah,
should pare something down to its simplest, most granular form.
right.
So yes, you shouldn't do it arbitrarily just for the sake of it. You should
Mhm.
do it where at all possible.
Okay. But I would consider that user story which came to you was not really a user story. It was a epic. Therefore, you are breaking it, right?
Or it's a feature, right? Because it goes
Well,
user story feature epic, no?
yeah, maybe, yes. So that means that you might have mistaken it for a user story, but when you try to study it, you say, "Oh, this is too big to resolve." So you can split it, and then it becomes user story. But my question was, can a user story be split? An actual user story during the life of a product. For example, you have picked up for your iteration 10 items, you completed 9 items, and the 10th item is 90% complete, but you cannot deliver. Can you do something
Or you
about it?
can, okay, I think I know what you're saying. Sorry. You're saying can you split it across two sprints?
Yes, that is the point.
It's still the same user story. I would have thought it's
Mhm.
not. Uh, I would have thought it's still just to be carried into the next back. That same user story needs to be carried forward into the next
Backlog.
backlog.
Yep.
That's that. Yeah.
Okay, that is very fine, and that is the normal way of doing it. But this is a peculiar case I am presenting to you. This story is 90% complete. I have no heart to send it back. I cannot be given more time to complete it. But if they could have given me one more day, they would have added one more day to my sprint. I probably would have done it. But it is almost complete. So can it be done? Something can be done about it. That I can
Um,
deliver. Okay, let me make it easy for you. Can I deliver part of the 10th user story?
um, that's a good question. I would have thought that that's a decision by the product owner.
Very good, very good. So can you take it back to the product owner and request him that we have done
Yes.
a colossal work in it, and it would be a waste of time if we start redoing it in the next sprint. So can the story be split into 90-10? We have to sit down with the product owner and the customer to decide what should be the acceptance criteria for the 90% and what should be the acceptance criteria for the 10%. We'll split the story into two parts, A and B. We can, is a story number 10A, story number 10B. 10A, we will present in the current iteration to be approved. 10B will be carried forward to the next product, into the product backlog, and if at all it comes up in the priority, it may be dealt in the next iteration. This is a very peculiar case. This doesn't happen very commonly. Generally, your initial answer is correct that if anything is incomplete, it goes back to the product backlog. But in this peculiar case, there is a concept of splitting the user stories like this.
Yep. Okay.
Good, good.
That makes sense. Yep.
Okay, here is a question. Which two stakeholders perform the project scope planning? We have got from our case study, project manager, product owner, project sponsor, and the project team. Who are the two people who perform the project scope planning?
And this obviously is in an agile environment, or is this a
It is a
hybrid, or is
hybrid.
this
It is a hybrid. It is
any?
a hybrid environment.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess the scope planning would, that's a good question. In a hybrid. Is it the product owner and the project team?
I would say it would be true in agile. It would be project manager and project team. Did you say the same thing?
No, I did not say that. Okay.
You said product owner.
Yeah.
Okay. So because project manager in a hybrid project is the boss, right? It is not like the team lead. He's the boss. He plans things at the higher level. So project manager along with the project team would actually be doing the scoping exercise. Well, I would consider product owner should also be playing some kind of role here, but that is not clearly mentioned. But because it is a hybrid environment, we probably can take it anyways. The project manager wants to give the executive team an overview of the work ahead at the next strategy meeting. Again, it is a hybrid project. Which artifacts should he show them? Should it be the scope management plan, product roadmap, scope statement, or work breakdown structure?
Yeah,
Overview
the
of the
project
work
manager
ahead.
wants to give the executive team an overview of the work ahead. Which artifact should he show them? An overview of the plan ahead. I guess the product roadmap.
Mhm. You are right. Because work breakdown structure doesn't, this is just the list of the work. Doesn't show how much has been done and what is ahead. And a scope statement and scope management plan. Scope management is definitely a no. Because scope management plan is just set of rules, guidelines. Scope statement just tell me what is the product scope and what is the project scope. But product roadmap is one thing which tells me the releases, what is to be done here and what is to be done later, and so on and so forth. Okay, we are
Uh,
done with scope.
just
Yep.
a strange question here. Did we who's in the project team in that definition there?
The
Who's
team members.
inside the project team and who's outside the project team in the first question?
Uh, Project team is just the agile team we are talking about because at the lower end in that hybrid project they have got agile teams working, adaptive teams working, and at the top there is a project manager. There is a team lead, but that is not mentioned here because of the role of the project manager. Because project manager is kind of a dictator, so project manager is imposing things onto them, and they are not really very self-organizing kind of teams, but still somehow they are agile teams. So this is
Okay,
very
in a project team, product owner isn't part of the project team.
no, not at all. Product owner is a separate role. team lead is a separate role, and project team is a separate role.
Okay.
But in this case, I know what happens in a hybrid project. We have in a predictive project, we have two main roles: the sponsor and the project manager. In agile project, we have the product owner, we have the team lead and the team, right? So when we are doing a hybrid project, we have all of those roles. We have got a project sponsor, we have got a project manager, we have got a product owner, we have got a team lead, and we have got the project team as well. But this team is agile, right? But on top, things are predictive, like the sponsor and the project manager are making all the decisions, they're sitting on top, and the product owner is looking after the product, and team is actually a agile team which is working according to that. And naturally, they would have their own team lead as well, which is not mentioned here. So all the roles of predictive and agile are present in a hybrid project. Okay, moving on to schedule. I suppose we can start with the schedule and we can do a little bit and for next 15, 17 minutes and then we can break off. Uh, uh, Schedule planning as far as the predictive as well as the agile is concerned, how do we look at it? Predictive is very simple, although more complex. I would consider the scheduling in predictive projects is very complex, right? The scheduling in an agile project is really very simple. Very simple. Actually, the rule of agile is, our adoptive projects is to keep the things simple. That's about it. You understand that we have got a Gantt chart and a network diagram and a critical path and a critical chain and a lot many complex things which are very good, but at the same time, they add complexity to the project. Agile or adaptive, they do not have anything which is complex. Like, rather than having a Gantt chart, I would rather be using a simpler tool which is like a grocery list, and that is called my task board or my Kanban board. They are so very simple that an idiot can understand what is happening here. To do, doing, and done, right? And in a schedule, you need to have an expert to look at what is happening, what is to be started after this, what is the critical path, and things like that. So here we don't bother ourselves with those complexities. We work in simple mechanism. We have work packages which are broken down later into activities in the predictive project. Then we establish the dependencies and precedences like the network diagram. Then we have the durations estimate or estimated upfront. Whereas in Agile, we don't do that. We only estimate the duration of a task when in a sprint. During the iteration, only then we do that kind of estimation. We don't do the upfront estimation of every activity of the project, not at all. In predictive projects, we have to. Then we have to also determine the critical path in the predictive. We don't have any critical path concept in Agile. We have a lot of complicated resource over allocations are there to be resolved and all. We have only a small team of 10 people working here. There is no means of having this kind of problem of over allocation of resources, not at all. Then schedule, I said it is a complex thing, and then we have to have situations where we have to compress the schedule, we have to adjust the resources, we have to do this and that. We don't need any of these things in Agile. In Agile, the things are comparatively simple. And the simplicity comes from the basic concept of time boxing. We are not, as you said, you have to have a scope of an iteration. Sorry, we don't have a scope for an iteration. We have a time box for an iteration, and whatever job can be done in that time box, that would be done. So in a way, if at all you consider there is a scope within the time box, that is not given to you. That is assigned by the team themselves. That is their own thinking. Well, they can do this much. So these time blocks are fixed. They have got cadences. A duration has been established, and that is going to stay put forever until the project finishes. So there are time boxes of a fixed time, and this flows continuously. Then we adopt the release time frame. We fit these iterations within the release map, like we did in our example. If there is a first release of 4 months and we have got 2 weeks iteration, simply these are 8 iterations we have to go on with, and ultimately we could even have an idea how many iterations will be there in the whole project. Although this may change over time, but you see, for the time being, we are comfortable that this is how our project looks like, right? But after every iteration, we will review the product roadmap. We can change the dates of the release. Naturally, the customer and the product owner sits down when we are doing that. Their opinion is included, and project could be, the size of the project could increase or decrease. So we will update the product roadmap, and our number of iterations can also change accordingly. It adopts release timeframes, and as I said, plans each iteration with work, prioritize, estimate, and decompose user stories on iteration to iteration basis. And then we determine the velocity of the iteration as we discussed. So we work with product owner to define the backlog after each iteration and plan the next. And this was, I called it the grooming of the backlog. After the iteration has been done, team goes back to the product book backlog to help product owner groom the backlog. So you see how different these two methods are from each other. They are completely poles apart. As far as the predictive is concerned, naturally we have to have just like we have any other management plan, we need to have like we have
Sorry,
the requirement management
you
plan. Yep.
you just go back one slide just for 10 seconds.
Okay.
Okay, you can go forward. Thanks.
Good. Okay. So what I was saying. Right. So schedule management plan, just like we had the requirements management plan and we had the scope management plan. So in predictive project, we have to have a management plan for everything. And all of these management plans, if you remember, they add up to our project management plan. You remember all the management plans and all the baselines and all the other affiliated, guidelines or plans are the components of the project management plan. So we have to have a upfront planning in a predictive project. So schedule management plan actually would include all the instructions and guidelines how we are going to do each step of the scheduling. Well, this is not the execution plan. This is the guidelines about doing anything. Like when the activities are identified, how are we going to calculate them? How are we going to estimate them? These guidelines are provided in the schedule management plan, but application of these guidelines will come later after the schedule management plan is complete. Then during the planning, we will do all those steps like estimating the activities and doing the duration estimations and cost estimations and this estimation and that estimation, network diagramming, Gantt chart development. Those are the practical steps we do. And at the end of developing all those things, we ultimately come up with the final schedule, which we get approved, and that becomes the schedule baseline. After it is approved, it becomes the schedule baseline. So the schedule management plan, which is the first document, which is the first guideline for this project, that is part of the project management plan. And the final document at the end of it, which is the baseline created, that also forms part of the project management plan. All the things we created in between, They will go where? They are part of not the project management plan. They are part of like the activity list, like the Gantt chart, like the network diagram, all those things which we are creating during this.
Schedule management plan.
Yes, they're part of.
The schedule management plan.
No, the guidelines are part of the schedule management plan. But all these artifacts which we are creating, they are going to go into the project documents. You remember that?
Oh yeah.
Project document. They are part of the project document. And the final approved version is the schedule baseline, and that is the executable version, which will actually be handed over to the execution people as if they can do things according to that schedule, right? So that's how execution actually is a mindless job. They don't have to plan anything. They don't have to, think about anything. They just have to do what is in the baseline. And in monitoring and control, that is a lot of mental exercise. Well, whatever has been done, is it being done right or wrong? And then how to correct it if there is any change required. So there is a lot of mental work involved in monitoring and control. And once everything has been done, then we go to the close. But anyways, for execution purposes, this baseline which we have created, this is sufficient to execute the work of the project. So we have three baselines: scope baseline, schedule baseline, and the cost baseline. These three baselines, if available, they are enough to run or execute the project. In hybrid approaches, the schedule management plan can help by placing management controls on the project timeline. Naturally, in hybrid approaches, on top we are predictive generally. So we will have developed some kind of a schedule management plan, but that could not be naturally that could be including all the guidelines, but they will be relevant to the hybrid project. Maybe they are not as precise as creating a lot many detailed critical paths and all, but maybe a little bit of broadly defined activities could be linked into a Gantt chart or a critical path or something like that. But down below, where the activities are happening, we will be completely adaptive, right? So this is how
Yep.
the schedule management plan can be translated into hybrid and predictive environments. Agile is completely different. What are the components of the schedule management plan, which all are the topics which could be addressed in the schedule management plan? First of all, this is interesting that we have to decide on what scheduling model are we going to be using. Now, what is this scheduling model? Especially in the predictive project, we have the concept of a schedule model. So, what is the schedule model? Now, let me give you an example for that. A model is like a balloon which is not inflated as yet, but it does have a shape. When we blow air into it, it will form that shape, right? So basically, if a balloon is shaped like a hand, when you blow it up, it will form a hand. It will inflate into a hand. Not inflate into a circle. So basically, when we apply a model, we provide a kind of a structure to that. What methodologies are to be used in this? What tools are to be used in this? How the schedule will be maintained? How the statuses can be updated? So schedule model will kind of give the basic guidelines about the model structure. Uh, Now, this model can only be populated when there is raw data available, like the durations of the activities, like the sequence of the activities. Now, when that sequence and the durations are put into it, that is like the air put into the balloon, and then it takes the exact shape of a Gantt chart. But that Gantt chart is not final because any change anywhere will affect those bars. Maybe the duration is increased, like it is putting more air into a finger of the balloon, and it will inflate more in that direction. So the model is there, the basic principles, the glove type model of balloon is there, but how does it, change its shapes? It is according to the air pumped into it. That is the data. What is the duration of the activity? If duration of the activity is not 5 days but 10 days, but that bar will be elongated to this much, but it will follow the same basic principles of that schedule model. I hope this makes a bit of sense to you.
Yep.
Second thing which we mentioned in our schedule management plan is to what level of accuracy are we going to do it? Like, what is the acceptable range used to determine realistic activity duration estimates? Like, it all depends upon what kind of project you are doing. Maybe it is a kind of project which is 8 years long. Naturally, in a 8 year long, you're not going to be planning at hourly level of the or levels of at the minute. Maybe you are not even planning on daily basis. You are planning on the basis of maybe weeks or months. So your activity durations could be kind of 3 months long or 2 months long or something like that. So whatever the project you are doing, the accuracy will be determined according to that. For example, if your normal activities are like 2 months long, then how much variation to that is too much for you? If your activities are generally 3 months long, maybe 1 week plus or minus is not a big problem for you. But a month plus or minus may be noticeable. So, at what level of accuracy can you estimate it? I hope you get the idea of that.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
to be mentioned in the schedule management plan. Then, how are you going to measure it? Is it going to be in days or hours or weeks or months? Again, depending upon project to project, some projects could be very small and they could be even measured in seconds or minutes, and other projects are very large and could be measured in months or weeks. So for this project, we will determine what are the units of measure. Organizational procedure links. You remember the WBS, we had a coding system there, and that coding system was going down to the work package level. Now, what we can do is when we will further break down those work packages into activities, we can follow the same numbering system downwards to the activities. For example, the work package number was 1.2.2, then my activities could be 1.2.2.1, 1.2.2.2, and so on. So basically, we are following the same organizational procedural links, because that way we will be able to place ourselves in the right place of the WBS, which arm of the WBS our activities really linked to. And naturally, if there are some allocations to be made, the accounting people may not have any problems. They would know that 1.2.2 is basically that work package, and these are the tasks of that work package. Normally, the budget is allocated to the work packages and not to the activities. But at least they would know that these activities are part of that work package. Then comes the control threshold. These are just some of the things which could be included in the schedule management plan. But you see, you could have many, many other topics to be discussed here. But these are the most important things which probably should be mentioned in your schedule management plan. Control thresholds. For monitoring the schedule performance before taking action, so what is the limit until which you need not escalate an issue, or you need not review it? So you define that if my schedule performance exceeds this point, then probably there is a need for escalation, meaning that is no more in the power of the project manager to decide. and the matter has to be escalated upwards. Or it may require a review or something like that. So we have to define that this is my threshold, project manager's control threshold. Anything beyond that must be decided by the sponsor or someone up there. That is one thing. Second thing is, this threshold can be expressed as a percentage deviation from the baseline, which is, which is acceptable. Anything beyond that is not acceptable. For example, if our performance is 1 to 2% plus or minus, that could be absorbable. But if it exceeds 5%, probably that is a point of concern. I have to bring it to the notice of the higher authorities. I have to escalate that issue. So basically, this you determine during the schedule management plan, that what are your limits, what are your control thresholds. Then for the purposes of performance measurement, what are the rules are you following? There are many methods. One of the very famous and important method in predictive project is earned value management, which anyways can be used in many other ways. Like even in agile, somehow we can use it. But classically, this is created for a predictive project. And if at all you use EVM, that you have to follow the rules of earned value management. Reporting: how frequently are you going to report the schedule related things, and what would be the format of those, what would be the frequency of those. Maybe some reports are to be communicated every week, and some are to be communicated on maybe quarterly basis. So and naturally, to whom? Some of the maybe to the CEO of the organization, you might be sending a quarterly report, which is a summarized report, whereas your team members or your various teams may be communicating amongst themselves the detailed reports, what we have done and things like that. Process descriptions, they describe how schedule management processes are documented. How you keep a record of everything, what you are doing. But this all story is about the predictive project. We do have a very detailed schedule management plan. We develop a model. We ascertain the accuracies, thresholds, rules, and all other things which are mentioned here. And that is how your schedule management a management plan is a very comprehensible document. And when we are doing this, you are trying to schedule things, you have to have a real understanding of benchmarking and historical data. Benchmarking, I have already explained to you. Probably, if you remember, I said benchmarking is always with the competition. You benchmark yourself against your competition, not against a standard. Normally, people say that it is a kind of a standard you are benchmarking yourself against. That is not true. Benchmarking is a competitive environment. It compares the current project schedule with a similar product or service schedule, which may have been some competitors may be doing it, or within your organization there is a competition, a similar project is doing it, or in past some projects have done it. So naturally, you compare yourself against others. Provide a good starting point for estimation before detailed analysis. So benchmark tells you that here is where you stand, and here is where others do stand, and you may know that you have to excel to that level. You have to improve yourself to that level. So yes, you are provided a launching pad, a starting point. Assess feasibilities in the initial stage of the scheduling. And historic data naturally, the data from the previous projects which have been completed by your organization or any other organization, that could also be used for planning your schedule.
So
Okay.
just on the benchmarking thing, are you saying in this context that it's still externally focused benchmarking, or can it be
It can be internal as well. It can be internal as well. You can compare your project with other projects in your organization currently being undergoing.
Okay.
You could compare it with external as well as internal. So this is a competition with someone, internally
Okay.
or externally.
Okay.
Okay, so this is done. Then come the hybrid structures. If you like, I can break off here because we have overshot the time
Yeah.
already.
How are we doing overall schedule wise? How much
We
uh
are on
how
slide.
many
We are on slide
yeah, we're on
number.
slide 51, so how many slides are in this?
Uh,
170 or something crazy like that?
yeah, there are 152 slides. We are one third. We have done. So we will try to run fast and try to do as much as tomorrow. But it seems like that if we are not fast enough, we may have to do it tomorrow and day after.
Oh, well, I think so. I think it'll take us, but I think that's fine, right? I think if
Yeah.
it takes us 2 more days,
Hmm.
that would be going pretty darn fast.
Yep.
Um, and then
Exactly.
to me, we'd be ahead of schedule, to be honest. But if I look at it, Tuesday,
Hmm.
Wednesday, because we only then have lesson 4 and 5
Yeah. Four
and
and five.
6.
Yeah. Six is very small. Six is very small. Four and five is our concern then. And probably even if we give 2 days to each lesson, that would be great. We will be able to do it.
Okay. Well, yeah. All right. Well, I'm happy if we get to finish this by Wednesday, and if we some of it slides into Thursday, so be it.
Mhm.
So what time do you want to start tomorrow?
I suppose as today, 4:30 is okay. I mean, 12:30 is okay with me.
Okay. That's fine. Let's go with 12:30. So, and I'll put that in my calendar.
Mhm.
Perfect. Okay. All right. Well, I'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you very much and take care. Bye
Thanks very
bye.
much, Suhail. Have a great evening. Bye bye.